Heyo everybody, Haku here with this week's read-through for Magical Girl Raising Project, or Mahou Shoujo Ikusei Keikaku ACES. So yeah, I'm really excited to read. As always, I love this arc so far. Chapter 1 was so good. And the first part of Chapter 2, we're now at the second part of Chapter 2, I forget if I said that in the intro, but the first part of Chapter 2 really focused on what Deluge's mental state is and what her purpose is here, what she's actually trying to accomplish. So all of that was really, really good, and now she seems to be working with Fled. The armor girl is probably, I guess, still with Shadowgale, so we don't exactly know what the two of them are doing. But Flez also brought in 3 other allies to help them out: Monoshiri Michan, Glacian, and Dark Cutie. So, yeah, I'm excited for all that. We stopped off just before we got to the introductions, because we ended off with, I think it was Fless saying, well, introductions are in order and all that. So I assume that's what we're going to get next up in the story. I don't think we're cutting away quite yet. And, yeah, for this one, we're starting at toward the end of page 11 here with Princess Deluge, and we're going to read until around the end of page 20. Now that's only 9 pages, but I said I was splitting this into 3 parts, and these 9 pages are kind of like, again, I just scrolled through, I didn't look or anything, but kind of chunkier, blockier texts than the last set of 10-ish pages. And the first set of 10-ish pages had an illustration, so of course that takes up like a full page. So yeah, either way, this might end up even being longer than last one, even though it's only 9 pages. So yeah, starting here with Princess Deluge toward the end of page 11. Princess Deluge. Dark Cutie was unfriendly, Monoshiri Michan had soft manners, and Glacian looked very lively. Despite these 3 being very different, they also had a common point. They didn't look like they had any vulnerabilities. By using them, Deluge could accomplish her objectives. She could have her revenge. Perhaps she was just being tempted. Perhaps she was just fueling herself, but that doesn't matter to her anymore. The facts were facts. Deluge was only standing here because her friends sacrificed themselves. So even if she's just being used by these people, it was all fine to her. It began with just a piece of paper. This folded piece of paper was placed on the bed where Deluge would use in the break room. Written on it were the words, "I'm a friend. I'm here to teach you all that you didn't know." Added to that, the paper was unusually placed. She was certainly interested in the proposal, but she had no one to confirm that it was the truth. The only one who could find out was Deluge. Deluge made use of Bluebell candy. She wanted to use the memories of her friends to become the best magical girl she could be. That was why she wanted to know more about magical girls, about the land of magic. When she told this to Bluebell, she only closed her eyes and said, "You're already perfect the way you are, Deluge." Still, she took her to a variety of places. It seems Bluebell wasn't just a simple worker, but a person of some authority, and the variety of places she took her was rich with just as much information. She took her to areas where scouts were currently looking for people with magical potential. She took them to where magical girls were currently being gathered to form a selection test in order to become official magical girls. There was even a library that had a selection dedicated to the history of magical girls. She was even taken, through the use of special gates, to a magical girl prison, trained with magical girls who were in combat practice, and visited facilities where she would study the properties of magical items and the nature of mascot characters, whose job was to help magical girls. Bluebell felt joy at seeing how active Deluge was in finding all these things by herself. If there was ever anything she needed at all, she need only ask and Bluebell guaranteed that she'd receive it. That's when she asked her to take her to the laboratory where the pure elements used to live. She wanted to see that again. Bluebell's face looked horrified, but when she asked her that she wanted to remember them one last time, she relented and took her there. The entrance to the facility was sealed off with tape, full of markings that said "Do not enter," and after asking a magical girl that was presumably from an investigation team, they were able to gain access to the briefing room. Bluebell began to look around. To Deluge, however, this was a nostalgic place. Even though even though she was probably only gone for a month or so, it felt like years since she was active here. She saw the table where Tempest would rest her legs on. Inferno would always scold her for that. Tempest would then cry and hug Quake, dumping her face into her chest. Quake would then pat Tempest's head with a difficult-looking face, trying to cheer her up. Just looking at the tables and chairs, and at the ceiling and floors, made her head filled with memories. These memories were always haunting her every day, unchanging. Deluge asked Bluebell for a favor. She wanted to know what happened to her friends in the end, and if there was a way for her to find out herself. Bluebell told her nothing good will come of you knowing that. Deluge responded by saying, with as much enthusiasm as she could muster, "It's a step I have to take if I want to be determined to be a magical girl. Please, I need to know." This convinced Bluebell right away. She was good at acting like something was life or death since long ago. With tears in her eyes, she said to Bluebell, "Please help me." That was how Deluge found out how her friends' last moments were. Barely a week after that, Deluge had stolen Bluebell's research and development pass, intruding on the labs in order to create more magical items and new models of disruptors. Then she acted based on her conspirators' instructions and kidnapped Shadowgale, securing her as well. Okay, now we're going over to Fleur. Let me grab a sip of water really quick first. I feel like my throat's getting a little dry. Okay, again, that was really, really good. I really like Deluge's story right now. Now we have Fleur. By the time the tea had reached her mouth, it was already cold. No longer was she drinking lukewarm tea, so she placed it on the saucer and pushed it to the corner of the table. Thanks to being made of marble, it was able to slide smoothly. Unfortunately, it slid off so smoothly that the inertia caused the teacup to fall. Thankfully, Fleur was able to quickly catch it with her hand. Magical girls did not need nutritional support from food and drink. They never needed to drink tea or eat candies. It was a ritual to her. She wanted to enjoy her luxurious goods, a force of habit from her human life. And besides, many magical girls just like the taste of tea. Fleur loved them as well, but the unpalatable taste of cold tea was not to her liking. Fleur rested her back on her wheelchair. The only person in the room was her. Everyone else had gone outside. She had been organizing all of her thoughts until now. For some reason, bits of her memory seemed to be missing. Before she could investigate why this entire incident happened, there was no way these incidents weren't related somehow. Fleur knew that Deluge was resentful to the Ask faction. The person in charge of that faction now was Grim Heart, an incarnation of Chena Ask Valmer. Since she took the lives of Deluge's friends and her saviors, she held that resentment toward the entire Ask faction. The Puck faction was trying to perform a ritual. The Ask faction was doing everything in their power to stop that ritual. Premium Sachko was the core of that very ritual. Thus her escape to W City places that city as the centerpiece between the conflict of the two factions, both trying to capture Sachko for themselves. There are many reasons for the Ask faction to want this successful capture, a big one being that they can use her as a bargaining chip against the Puck faction. She understood that very much, but how did Deluge come to that conclusion? Someone who was living and training in a place completely isolated from magical girl society shouldn't know about things like the Ask faction or the Three Sages. Not only did she have that information, she also knew that Fleur was a person of influence. The roots of her information extended to almost all divisions, which means someone from the homelands must be providing her information. That must be how she knew. Despite being a victim, Deluge couldn't possibly gather that much information on her own. She even knew about Shadowgale. Fleur never released that information about her, and kept as much information about her from leaking as she possibly could. There were only a limited amount of people who even knew Shadowgale existed. Someone had told her. The only question is who. Even for someone who sought revenge, taking what the Ask faction wanted rather than attacking the Ask faction itself seemed a little too roundabout. Perhaps the one pulling the strings wanted Sachko themselves, or perhaps they wanted Sachko as a bargaining chip for the Puck faction. The way Deluge was using Shadowgale with Fleur, the way Deluge was using Shadowgale with Fleur, of course. Were they trying to control the Puck faction by kidnapping Premium Sachko? Were they perhaps trying to get involved with the ritual by controlling the Puck faction? Did Premium Sachiko serve other purposes than just the ritual? Right now, Fleck could only guess at straws, but there were too many factors involved that complicate things. Okay, so my guess is to who it is that's feeding information to and working with Ripple. I think it's either going to be the original Joker Shufflin', and of course Joker and Grimheart would still be alive, and the Joker Shufflin' is sort of trying to, because we see she's like really super capable, but stuck working for Grimheart, who's kind of an asshole to her, so why wouldn't she want to kind of betray the Osk faction and gain some power for herself? Either that, or probably not Pithy Frederica herself. She's probably using Ripple as an intermediary, but maybe Pithy Frederica, because she seems like someone who can gather a lot of information very easily, who would probably know more about Flea and how to manipulate her. And we still have stuff that was going on with the old lady. We don't know who Professor Tanaka really was, but with the old lady and with Flea and the tea shop and everything. So I feel like this could all connect back together, and with Pithy and the tea shop, I mean. So I feel like it could all connect back together, and Pithy could be the one. And if that's the case, I don't necessarily think she's trying to work with. Actually, in either case, I'm not even sure if they're necessarily trying to work with Deluge, but more manipulate her for their own ends, is how I see it, really. To use Deluge's want for revenge against their enemies, whether they be the Osk faction or the Puck faction, to gain power for themselves. But either way, let me continue reading. There was a knock on the door that repeated 3 times. Fla wiped off any thoughts from her mind. "Come in," she called out. The one who peeked into the room was Monoshiri Michan. "Hey, we'll be going soon, right?" I'd like you to do what Deluge asks until she's satisfied. That'll be your job." "Ah, understood. Oh, one more thing." She called out to Michan, who was just about to head back out, and pointed at the teacup. "It's gotten cold. Can you change this?" "Okay, hold on." She placed a cardboard box on the floor. Michan picked up Flea's teacup. "Clean tea to green tea." Okay, the teacup that Michan held now had steam. A refreshing fragrance passed through her nose. She felt a gentle saltiness and the scent of kelp. Flea smiled and gave a thumbs up. Michan had an amazing magical skill. By grabbing something in her hand and changing one syllable of its name, she can change the object itself. Though it was limited to objects she could actually hold, and it could only work on inanimate objects, but otherwise she was free to change it as she pleased. Okay, and with her actual ability, it's something that we're just going to have to give some leeway to. We're just going to have to give some leeway to when it comes to translation, because it's probably incredibly difficult to translate, because it's probably a lot of play on words, and a lot of words that don't necessarily translate that well into direct English. You see it a lot with series that have like a lot of puns and stuff, that sometimes that kind of thing is difficult. So like clean tea to green tea, who knows, clean tea could be something that the Japanese refer to cold tea as, and that's why changing the syllable to green makes it like fresh again. So again, it's one of those things where there's probably not a great translation directly into English, or even a great way to translate it in general, because of the way her power is. Okay, limited objects she could hold and work on inanimate objects, but otherwise she was free to change anything as she pleased. Anything else? Just the green tea, thank you. She respectfully received the teacup, sipping it in her mouth. Good work. Thanks for the compliments. Now then, I have to get back to my actual work. Michan left the room. Flea once more returned to her thoughts. If Flea were able to see her opponent's face, she'd know all about them. However, once she became too overconfident with it, However, she once became too overconfident with it, so she was deceived via magical skills that both camouflage someone's facial expression as well as camouflaging their own emotions. However, that was an exception, not the norm, and many magical girls possess those powers. And not many magical girls possess those powers. Was Deluge receiving outside help? The only ones who could contact Deluge would be someone who wouldn't be with Deluge right now. Some faces popped into Fle's head. There was no one that quickly came to mind that would both betray her and support Deluge at once. Not thinking more of it, Fle munched on her kelp. Okay, so now we're toward the end of page 16, going to Glacian. Glacian waited for Michan in a backyard of sorts, or some kind of garden. Everything around her seemed to cost some large amount of money. Seeing them made her rather irritated. Glacian opens cake shops once a month. She bought out a ramen store and refurbished it into a cake shop, though it was only open once a month. As she had a patissier motif as a magical girl, naturally she made magical cakes and sold them. She'd hear rumors like, the shop is small but the cakes are super delicious, and there's this beautiful girl that makes cakes like they were created by a master, which made her smile. However, being suddenly called, she wasn't able to open it this time. Even Michan had complained, and I just wanted to visit the new library they built at the neighborhood's... I had just wanted to visit that new library they built at the neighborhood city. It seems she's also in a bind. In spite of all these, the magical girls that they were supposed to be supporting, Princess Deluge, was being very uncooperative. She had the look that Glacian remembered when she was in her teen rebellious years, that kind of uncooperative. All she told them was that she wanted to kidnap Premium Sachiko. She didn't even respond to their request to tell them their magical skill, nor did she even greet them. She didn't even give them the bare minimum response, just remaining in complete silence. The surrounding black creatures with cubed wings turned around. It seems ready to attack anyone that presented a threat to Deluge. They were commonly known as demons, used by mages as personal bodyguards. Glacian knew that much, as she was used to being appointed to do behind-the-scenes work for human resources. She's had them as allies, but she's also fought them as enemies. However, she's never seen the types that Deluge carried around with her. Meaning they had to be new models, and magical girls that were allowed to carry new demon models were big deals. Probably not someone she'd want to make angry, obviously not someone she'd want to fight. She wouldn't want to do anything scary, and she'd rather cover her nose than smell something horrible. Living a long life in the business required that you be wise and prudent in what you want to do. Those who couldn't live like that derail themselves from the life of a magical girl, or perhaps from life itself. There was a solid argument for both. Glacian wasn't about to derail herself from either, so she chose not to go against Deluge. Sometimes for stress relief she'd answer the call, but she does regret leaving her sweet shop business for this kind of job. Hey guys, sorry for the wait. From behind the building, Monoshiri Michan's voice cut through their thoughts. Oh no, it's fine. I can wait here for 10 days, honestly. Also, I just thought, another person who it could be that was passing the notes and working with Deluge is actually just Bluebell Candy. Bluebell Candy could just be manipulating her and pretending to just be just a normal, not sketchy friend. But either way, it's fine. I can wait here for 10 days too, honestly. Annie, you've always been lazy like that. You say that, Michan, but you always talk about how we needed to work as hard as possible. What can I say? I hate it. The two of them were smiling and laughing as they talked, while Dark Cutie was standing off by herself. Glacian repositioned her glasses, and Monoshiri Michan readjusted her coat. Looks like our job's gonna be a hard one this time. The boss seemed different than usual. She seems a bit desperate, isn't she? My. Well, if we're just gonna barge in on a war between the three sages, we gotta be prepared. In Michan's line of work, she's always had to prepare to kill or be killed. She's never once complained that it was difficult, always silently nodding her head. This was because she was only called whenever something annoying or dangerous popped up. She didn't even question what their boss's motives were in trying to interfere in a war. All preparations good here. Same here. Time to proceed as usual. Stick to the plan, all right? This was the first time Monoshiri Michan had spoken stick to the plan out loud. Normally she wouldn't have to say it, Their leader Dark Cutie already knew this, and Michan and Glacienne obviously did too. However, since Deluge was here, she had to say it. Dark Cutie wasn't a magical girl that could get easily worried. That was why you weren't able to leave anything to her, but instead to her sub-leader. She wasn't exactly the face of elegance. First, we find Puck-Puck's manor. Annie can move her point of view from there. I've already started scouting ever since I heard we're moving into W City. Leave it to me. Monoshiri Michan was shouting out her instructions with a loud voice. Normally, Michan wouldn't even shout when giving orders or warnings. She wasn't even the type to let her emotions affect how loudly she talks. Nor was she the type to have emotions that would cause shouting anyway. She knew exactly why Michan was shouting. She had to make sure Deluge was listening to her instructions. Although Flea had told them to follow Deluge's instructions, the reality was very uncommunicative towards them. The reality was that Deluge was very uncommunicative toward them, so they didn't have a choice. While still treating Deluge like a VIP who couldn't be angered, Michan had let her know of their policy. Even if their client won't communicate, being a VIP means that they shouldn't get in conflict with them. Glacienne could see the anxious look on Michan's face. Dark Cutie wasn't incompetent as a leader. The point was always to divide up the roles. Dark Cutie was a high-profile anime character. Her all-black costume gave off a sense of strength. Her dark eyes were intimidating. There were a lot of things she was able to accomplish just by being the front man of the group. Frankly speaking, if the scholarly-looking Michan or the sweets motif Glacienne were to lead, they'd be underestimated a lot. Speaking of role division, only Glacienne was able to do Glacienne's job. When she realized that she was being called to that kind of job, she had asked Dark Cutie what her impressions on Deluge were. "She looks like the villainous type," answered Dark Cutie. If that were the case, Dark Cutie had considered Deluge an ally for now. She could only hope that Dark Cutie's villainous observation didn't mean that Deluge was actually bad. I love she's a person like Accelerator, where she's just into, yes, I am the villain. Everything villainous is good. Alright then. When Michan had only uttered this sentence, she instantly went into a fighting stance. Dark Cutie was already shaping her arms in a cross-like position, moving behind Michan. Glacienne was a little late, but joined in with the two. Deluge. The three of them were vigilant for unexpected visitors, but barely noticed that she had arrived. The girl had Lily of the Valleys on her back, telling Deluge, "If something's wrong, you need to tell me," while shaking Deluge's shoulders. Deluge only gave her an annoyed-looking face. Michan looked at Dark Cutie, but she seemed to have a cool face and wasn't thinking of moving. Glacienne had quickly looked away before Michan looked toward her. Alright, Michan sighed. "I'm sorry, Deluge." Deluge looked toward Michan. "Is she a friend of yours?" The girl's posture was low. She was polite, but she appeared without any signs. Deluge gave Michan a glare before looking back at the Lily of the Valley magical girl. "She's with me." Deluge spat out those words. It was like she was being accompanied by a family member before the big raid. The silliness of the situation made Glacienne snort in laughter. Okay, so yeah, this was about the same length of recording as last week's. So I'm going to leave things off here. Again, bit of a short video, but that's just because I have a lot to do right now, and I feel like splitting it into 3 parts per chapter works well anyway. So I'll see if I need to rethink that next week or anything. But at least for right now, yeah, at least for this video, next video, this is it. But I loved it. Once again, I do really like this new group of 3 magical girls. I want to see more of Dark Cutie. We got to see a bit of Monoshiri Michan here. I see that Bluebell Candy is the next thing up, so I'm assuming that's the girl that came at the end. I'm excited to see more of her from her perspective. This also makes me think maybe she isn't. Maybe she is on the up and up. She's not manipulating Deluge or anything. But yeah, I love this group. I'm enjoying reading them. And I absolutely loved reading the group before with Uluru and Sarami and all. So yeah, this arc's just been very good, and I'm excited to see what other turns it can take. We're still very early on. We're not even, I would say, even close to halfway through, in my opinion. So yeah, there's a ton left to do in this arc. I'm excited for it, and I hope you are too. Like if you did like the video, and comment down there to tell me what you thought of my thoughts on this, what your thoughts are on this part of the chapter. Subscribe for more Magical Girl Raising Project, much more on the channel. Follow on Twitter if you want. I can try to keep you updated there and stuff for the channel or talk to you there. And if you want a link to the Discord server to talk to me or more of us there about this series or anything else, just ask and I'll give you a link. Lastly, if you want to help support the channel on Patreon, there will be a link in the description. And yeah, it would just help keep the channel running if you would like to help keep the channel running on Patreon. Also, I'm going to be adding a new series to the channel on Sundays, and patrons are going to get to vote for what that series is. So you can also get something out of it other than just knowing you help me continue to keep the channel going. But that's it. Thank you once again for watching, and I'll see you all next time.